My name is Madison, and I'm 31 years old. For 12 years, I've driven the same Toyota Corolla while quietly building a $75 million tech empire. Most people, including my status-obsessed family, have no idea. Tonight is our annual Thanksgiving dinner, where I'll endure their judgmental comments about my ordinary appearance. I've always believed in finding people who value me for myself, not my bank account. But sometimes, worlds collide in the most satisfying ways. If you've ever had to deal with judgmental relatives, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe for more stories about standing your ground when it matters most. I grew up in a beautiful colonial-style home in an affluent Boston suburb. From the outside, we had everything: the luxury cars, the country club memberships, the European vacations. But inside those perfectly painted walls, warmth was scarce. My parents, Caroline and Robert, measured everything by its price tag, including their children's worth. From my earliest memories, our dinner conversations revolved around acquisitions, promotions, and which neighbor had just upgraded their summer home. My father would return from work, barely acknowledging my existence before launching into stories about closing deals. My mother spent more time arranging charity galas than attending my school events. Success in our family had a very specific definition: visible wealth, prestigious connections, and social standing. I was 12 when I discovered coding. My math teacher, Mrs. Hartley, noticed my aptitude for logical thinking and suggested an after-school computer club. The first time I made a simple program work, something clicked inside me. Here was a world where results mattered more than appearances. I was hooked. By high school, I was developing small apps for local businesses, while my parents pushed me toward more appropriate activities. Technology is for the help, Madison, my mother would say with a dismissive wave. Focus on debate club if you want to meet the right kind of boys. When college application season arrived, I received a full scholarship to MIT for computer science. My parents were horrified. Harvard Business School is the only acceptable option, my father insisted, threatening to withhold support if I didn't comply. I chose MIT anyway, moving into a tiny dorm room with nothing but my laptop and determination. It was in that dorm room, during my sophomore year, that I built the prototype for what would become my company. I noticed how small businesses struggled to compete with corporate giants in the digital marketplace. My platform leveled the playing field, giving independent shops the same technological advantages as major corporations at a fraction of the cost. A professor connected me with an angel investor who saw the potential immediately. We launched with 20 small businesses in Boston. Within 6 months, we had 500 clients across New England. By the time I graduated, we had secured Series A funding and were expanding nationally. The Series B funding round was when everything exploded. A major venture capital firm valued the company at over $100 million. My stake made me wealthy beyond anything my status-conscious family could imagine. And I told almost no one. It wasn't about deception. I made a conscious choice to maintain a modest lifestyle because I'd seen firsthand how wealth changes relationships. I bought a comfortable but unassuming 3-bedroom house in a middle-class neighborhood. I kept driving my reliable Corolla. I wore quality clothes, but nothing flashy or designer-labeled. I wanted people in my life who cared about me, not my net worth. Only my assistant Jennifer and a few close friends knew the truth. Jennifer had been with me since the early days, starting as an intern and growing into my right hand. She understood my values and respected my choices, though she occasionally teased me about living like a normal when I could afford so much more. As I prepared for the annual Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' home, I debated whether to even attend. Last year had been particularly brutal. My cousin Brian had spent 20 minutes describing his new Mercedes while asking pointed questions about my little website thing. Aunt Denise had suggested her husband could find a place for me at his insurance company since my startup was obviously struggling. Through it all, My parents had watched with that familiar mixture of disappointment and embarrassment. "You should have some clever responses ready this time," Jennifer suggested during our morning call. "Or better yet, just tell them the truth and watch their faces melt." I laughed as I sorted through my closet. I'm not looking for a dramatic confrontation. I just want to get through dinner without feeling like I'm 16 again. I settled on dark jeans, a simple cashmere sweater, and minimal jewelry. Professional enough to avoid criticism about dressing like a college student, but nothing that would signal wealth. Looking in the mirror, I gave myself the same pep talk I'd been delivering for years. You are successful by every measure that matters. Their opinions don't define you. Part of me still hoped that someday my family might see beyond material success. That they might ask about my passion for creating technology that helps people, or notice my happiness, or simply accept me as I am. It was this stubborn hope that kept me attending these gatherings despite the inevitable disappointment. The contrast between my family relationships and my friendships couldn't be more stark. At work, I had built a team based on shared values and mutual respect. Most of my employees had no idea I was the owner. I introduced myself as a senior developer and worked alongside them. These authentic connections nourished me in ways my family never could. My dating life had followed a similar pattern. Early on, I'd made the mistake of being open about my success, attracting a string of men more interested in my company valuation than my character. Since adopting my policy of discretion, I'd found more genuine connections. Recently, I'd been seeing Sam, a high school science teacher who loved my entrepreneurial spirit but had no idea of the scale of my success. Our conversations centered on ideas, not possessions, and for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about a relationship. With one last glance in the mirror, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I could have called my driver and arrived in the company Tesla, but instead, I slid behind the wheel of my trusted Corolla. Some battles weren't worth fighting, and some truths would keep another day. For now, I just wanted to get through Thanksgiving with my dignity intact. The moment I turned onto my parents' street, my stomach tightened. Each house stood like a monument to affluence, with manicured lawns and professional holiday decorations already in place. My parents' colonial mansion, with its imposing columns and circular driveway, seemed to judge me before I even arrived. I pulled up behind a line of luxury vehicles, Brian's shiny new Porsche, Aunt Linda's Mercedes SUV, my father's Jaguar. The family valet, Thomas, approached my car with the same expression he wore every year, a mixture of pity and confusion at the aging Toyota in this lineup of European engineering. "Good evening, Miss Madison," he said, holding the door as I stepped out. "Hi, Thomas. How's your daughter doing at college?" I asked, handing him my keys. His surprise at being remembered as a person rather than a service provider was evident. "She's doing very well. Thank you for asking. Made the dean's list last semester." "That's wonderful. Computer science, right? Tell her to send me her resume when she graduates." As Thomas smiled genuinely for the first time, I turned toward the imposing front door. My finger hovered over the doorbell for several seconds before I finally pressed it, mentally donning my emotional armor. The door swung open to reveal my mother, Caroline, immaculately dressed in a designer outfit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her smile was picture perfect, not reaching her eyes. "Madison, darling, you've finally arrived," she said, air kissing near my cheeks. "Everyone's already here." The slight emphasis on finally, despite my being precisely on time, was typical. In our family, being exactly on time meant you were late. I stepped into the grand foyer with its soaring ceiling and crystal chandelier. My father, Robert, glanced up briefly from his conversation with Uncle William, giving me a distracted nod before returning to their discussion about golf handicaps. Cousin Melissa spotted me and nudged Brian, both of them exchanging a look I pretended not to notice. At 34, Melissa had recently become engaged to a hedge fund manager, her third engagement, but likely the first to reach the altar due to her fiancé's suitable bank account. Madison, is that the same sweater you wore to Christmas 2 years ago? Melissa asked, her voice carrying just enough for nearby relatives to hear. Good memory, I replied with a smile. It's comfortable and well made. I suppose that's economical, she said, emphasizing the word like it was a disease. Aunt Denise approached, cocktail in hand, eyes scanning me from head to toe. You've put on a little weight, haven't you, dear? But it suits you. You were looking so gaunt last time, we were all concerned. I hadn't gained an ounce, but this was Aunt Denise's way of establishing dominance early. Thanks for your concern. I've been focused on health rather than weight. So sensible, she said with a thin smile. And how is your little computer business? Still afloat. It's doing well, thank you, I said, deliberately vague. Uncle William joined us, glass of expensive scotch in hand. Madison, I was just telling your father about my friend's son who works at Google. Very impressive resume. He might be able to give you some pointers about what is it exactly that you do again? I run a technology platform that helps small businesses compete in the digital marketplace, I explained, knowing the explanation would be ignored as it had been countless times before. Right, websites and such, he nodded dismissively. Anyway, this young man started at $200,000 a year. Imagine that. Of course, he went to Stanford, not, where did you go again? MIT, I replied. Ah yes, the technical school, he said, as if I'd attended a local community college. As we moved into the formal living room, I noticed I'd been strategically seated between Cousin Brian and my mother's friend Patricia, who had been trying to set me up with her son for 3 consecutive holidays despite my clear lack of interest. Still driving that old car, Madison? Brian asked loudly as I sat down. I thought those things had a lifespan of 10 years max? Yours must be on its last legs. I took a sip of the water I'd requested instead of wine. 12 years actually, and running perfectly. Toyota makes reliable cars. My mother laughed nervously. Madison is just being practical while she finds herself. Not everyone is cut out for real business, my father added from across the room, not bothering to lower his voice. Some people need more time to find their path. I maintained my composed expression while internally absorbing the sting of his words. From the corner, I caught my grandmother Ruth watching me with knowing eyes. At 85, Grandma Ruth was the only family member who seemed to see beyond the surface. She gave me a small, supportive nod. During a momentary lull in the conversation, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a brief reprieve. Once alone, I leaned against the marble countertop and exhaled slowly. I pulled out my phone and texted Jennifer. The usual parade of subtle insults has begun. Her response came immediately. Remember, you could buy and sell that entire room. Their opinion equals irrelevant. Call me if you need a staged emergency exit. I smiled at her support, squared my shoulders, and returned to the battlefield. The dining room gleamed with old money elegance. The antique mahogany table stretched beneath a crystal chandelier, set with the family's heirloom china, sterling silver flatware, and hand-blown crystal glasses. Place cards in my mother's perfect calligraphy positioned each guest strategically. Not surprisingly, I was seated directly across from Brian and diagonally from Aunt Denise, the family's most enthusiastic critics. As the first course was served by the catering staff, conversation immediately turned to acquisitions and accomplishments. Cousin Jason, freshly returned from Colorado, dominated the first 10 minutes. The Aspen property was listed at $4.2 million, but my real estate guy got it for $3.8, he explained, gesturing with his fork. For 1,000 square feet, ski-in/ski-out access, and the master bath has heated marble floors. You all have to come for New Year's. Several relatives oohed appropriately while I focused on my soup. I'd recently donated $3 million to build a technology center in an underserved Boston neighborhood, but that wasn't the kind of accomplishment that earned recognition at this table. Aunt Linda was next, detailing her appointment to the board of Boston Memorial Hospital. Of course, it's a significant commitment of my time, but giving back is so important. The fact that the position was largely ceremonial and obtained through her husband's connections went unmentioned. My father cleared his throat, commanding attention as always. Since we're sharing news, Caroline and I have decided to upgrade. We've purchased a 60-foot yacht for next summer. The Sunseeker Manhattan 65. She'll be delivered in May. Appropriate exclamations of admiration followed while the staff served the second course. Then, inevitably, attention turned to me. Madison, my father said, anything new with you? Before I could answer, Brian interjected. Still coding in your spare time? Making those little website things? I took a measured sip of water. Actually, we've expanded significantly this year. Our platform now serves over 10,000 small businesses across the country, and we've recently. Did you hear about Melissa's engagement? My mother interrupted, effectively erasing my achievement. Kenneth proposed at Lou Bernardine in New York with a 3-carat diamond. Melissa thrust her hand forward, the enormous ring catching the light. Custom Tiffany setting. Kenneth knows I deserve the best. Speaking of deserving things, Aunt Denise said, turning to me with a predatory smile, Madison, dear, when are you going to find a nice man and settle down? 30 is approaching quickly, you know. I'm 31, actually, I corrected quietly. Exactly my point, she continued. The good ones get snapped up so quickly. Williams' firm just hired a brilliant young attorney. Harvard Law, family money, and single. I could introduce you. Thank you, but I'm seeing someone, I replied. Oh! My mother perked up. Who is he? What does he do? His name is Sam. He's a high school science teacher. The silence that followed was deafening. My father frowned into his wine glass. Aunt Denise and my mother exchanged a look of barely concealed horror. A teacher, my mother finally said. How dedicated of him. Teachers are so important, Cousin Melissa added with false brightness. Someone has to educate the help. I set down my fork, appetite diminishing. Sam has a PhD in molecular biology. He chose teaching because he believes in making science accessible to the next generation. Noble, my father said dismissively. But one can't raise a family on nobility. I bit back the response that I could financially support 10 families without noticing. Instead, I simply said, he's very good at what he does. During the brief lull as the main course was served, I overheard my mother speaking to Aunt Linda in the adjacent butler's pantry, their voices carrying more than they realized. Madison is still in the stubborn phase, my mother said. All that potential, wasted on this computer hobby. Robert is at his wit's end. Have you tried introducing her to the Caldwell boy? Aunt Linda suggested. His father could give her a real job at the investment firm. We've tried everything, my mother sighed. It's embarrassing when people ask what she's doing with her life. I just don't understand where we went wrong. The conversation felt like a physical blow. All these years, I'd known they were disappointed, but hearing them discuss me like a problem to be solved made the abstract knowledge painfully concrete. As I sat there, absorbing this fresh hurt, memories surfaced unbidden. The science fair in 7th grade, where I'd won first place, only to have the achievement overshadowed by Brian's soccer trophy presentation the same evening. My college graduation from MIT, summa cum laude, where my father had spent the celebration questioning my choice of major instead of congratulating me. The launch of my first successful app, which my parents had attended out of obligation, but left early to attend a neighbor's cocktail party. The pattern was clear and consistent. Nothing I achieved would ever be enough if it didn't fit their narrow definition of success. Grandma Ruth, seated beside me, sensed my distress. She patted my hand gently under the table and whispered, "They see what they want to see, dear. I see you." Her small kindness nearly broke my composure. On my other side, my young cousin Lily, just 16 and still finding her place in the family hierarchy, leaned over. I think what you do sounds really cool, she said quietly. I'm taking coding in school now. That's wonderful, Lily, I replied, genuinely pleased. If you ever want to talk about it or need any help, just call me. Her face lit up at the offer, providing a moment of genuine connection amid the superficial performances around us. My rarely seen Uncle Henry, the family's black sheep who had chosen a career in academia over the family investment business, caught my eye from down the table and raised his glass slightly in a subtle show of solidarity. These small moments of authentic connection provided brief respite from the otherwise oppressive atmosphere. As the meal progressed, I found myself questioning why I maintained this facade. I could end the charade with a few sentences, prove them all wrong, and watch their expressions change. The temptation was powerful, yet something held me back. Revealing my success wouldn't change who they fundamentally were. It wouldn't transform our relationships into the supportive family bonds I'd always craved. If anything, it would simply shift their interest from dismissal to exploitation. Besides, there was a principle at stake. I believed in being valued for who I was, not what I owned. Walking away from that belief, even in the face of their cruelty, felt like surrendering something essential about myself. So I sat, enduring each barbed comment and dismissive glance, my resolve strengthening with each slight. I would remain true to myself, regardless of the outcome. The dessert course arrived with theatrical precision, servers placing delicate plates of chocolate soufflé and crème brûlée before each guest. Crystal dessert wine glasses were filled with amber liquid that cost more per bottle than most people spent on a week's groceries. The dining room glowed with soft light from the chandelier and carefully placed candles, creating an atmosphere of refined elegance that contrasted sharply with the conversation. By this point, Brian had consumed enough wine to abandon even the pretense of civility. He leaned across the table toward me, his voice carrying despite his attempt at a conspiratorial tone. Madison, I've been meaning to ask. Don't you get tired of blending in with the masses? I mean, that sweater probably came from a department store, and you're still driving that economy car from college. I kept my expression neutral. I like my clothes, and my car gets me where I need to go. But don't you want more? He pressed, gesturing expansively around the opulent room. This is how successful people live. Not like, well, you know. Aunt Denise set down her dessert spoon with a delicate clink. Speaking of success, Madison, Williams' firm has several openings in their administrative department. Nothing fancy, but it would be a stable job with benefits. I'd be happy to put in a word. My mother, sensing potential embarrassment, quickly interjected. Madison is still figuring things out. She has that website business. App development platform, I corrected quietly. Yes, that, she continued without acknowledging the correction. It's just taking a bit longer than expected to gain traction. Melissa, perhaps feeling overshadowed by the attention directed my way, reached for the wine bottle. As she passed it toward Brian, her arm made a suspiciously deliberate movement, sending a splash of red wine directly onto my light-colored sweater. Oh! I'm so clumsy, she exclaimed with exaggerated dismay. And on your nice, what is that, cotton blend? As I dabbed at the spreading stain with my napkin, Brian snickered behind his wine glass. Maybe it's time for a wardrobe upgrade anyway. Although I guess some people just peak in high school. The table erupted in laughter, with the exception of Grandma Ruth and young Lily, both looking uncomfortable with the cruelty on display. The combined weight of the evening's slights pressed against my chest, making it difficult to breathe. I felt the familiar sting of tears threatening at the corners of my eyes, but refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. In that moment of raw vulnerability, I faced a choice: continue absorbing their barbs with dignified silence or finally stand up for myself. The tense silence stretched as I considered my response. Then, like divine intervention, my phone rang. The ringtone cut through the awkward moment, and I glanced at the screen to see Jennifer's name. I'm sorry, I should check this. It might be important, I said, preparing to step away from the table. Really, Madison? During dessert, my mother scolded. The reception is spotty in here, I explained, making a split-second decision. I'll put it on speaker so I can still hear if I step away. Before anyone could object, I answered the call and placed the phone on the table. Hello, Jennifer? Jennifer's crisp, professional voice filled the dining room. Ms. Madison, I apologize for interrupting your evening, but I wanted to confirm that your private jet is fueled and ready for your Tokyo meeting tomorrow. The executive team is assembled, and the contract documents for the $50 million acquisition are prepared for your signature. The silence around the table was immediate and absolute. I kept my expression neutral as Jennifer continued. Also, the CEO of TechVision called personally to follow up on your lunch last week. He's eager to finalize the partnership we discussed. And the foundation board has approved your proposal for the $15 million tech education center in the underserved districts. My father's coffee cup froze midway to his mouth. My mother let out a nervous laugh that died immediately when no one joined her. Brian's mouth hung open slightly, his wine glass suspended in his hand. Jennifer, perfectly executing our pre-arranged emergency exit strategy, continued seamlessly. One last thing. Should we have the Tesla delivered to your primary residence or the vacation home in Nantucket? The customization options you selected are complete. Thank you, Jennifer, I replied calmly. Please have it delivered to the main house. And let the Tokyo team know I'll be reviewing the acquisition documents tonight. Certainly, Ms. Madison. Will there be anything else? No, that's all for now. Thank you. I ended the call and slowly placed my phone back on the table, folding my hands in my lap. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Every eye at the table was fixed on me, expressions ranging from shock to disbelief to sudden calculation. I allowed the silence to stretch for several seconds, taking a small, private satisfaction in the tableau of frozen expressions around the table. When I finally spoke, my voice was calm and measured. I suppose I should clarify a few things, I said, dabbing the wine stain on my sweater one last time before setting the napkin aside. The website business I run is actually Nexus Technologies. We're currently valued at just over $300 million, and I'm the founder and CEO. My father's face went through a remarkable transformation, confusion giving way to disbelief, and then a dawning realization. Nexus Technologies? The software company that was featured in Forbes last month. The same, I confirmed. We're expecting to hit $500 million in valuation after our next funding round. But that's, you never said. My mother stammered, her social poise deserting her for perhaps the first time in her adult life. I've told you exactly what I do at every family gathering for the past 8 years, I replied evenly. You just never listened. I turned to face Brian directly. To answer your earlier question, yes, I still drive that economy car from college. I could buy a fleet of Porsches without noticing the expense, but I choose not to. The car serves its purpose, and I don't measure my worth by what I drive. Brian's face flushed red, his earlier confidence evaporating. I was just kidding around, you know that. Were you? I asked. Like you were kidding around when you told everyone at my college graduation party that computer science was for people who couldn't handle real business? Before he could respond, I addressed Aunt Denise. Thank you for the offer of an administrative position at Uncle William's firm. I currently employ over 200 people, including 15 Harvard graduates who specifically sought out our company because of our innovation and company culture. But I appreciate you thinking of me. Her mouth opened and closed without producing sound, resembling a fish suddenly finding itself on land. I turned to my father, maintaining the same calm tone. Dad, in the 8 years since I founded my company, you've never once visited our offices. They're 20 minutes from your downtown meeting spots. I've invited you to every major launch and milestone celebration. You've always been too busy. His expression hardened defensively. I didn't realize it was something serious. You always downplayed it. I described it accurately, I corrected. You chose to hear what fit your preconceptions. Looking at my mother, I continued. Mom, for months ago when you asked what I was doing with my life, I told you we had just closed a major investment round. You changed the subject to Melissa's country club membership. I didn't understand what that meant. Darling, she protested. You know I'm not technical. It wasn't a technical statement. It was about business success in terms you would normally celebrate, just not for me. I kept my voice level, stating facts rather than accusations. I surveyed the table, noting the rapid recalculations happening behind each pair of eyes. I've never lied about what I do or who I am. I simply haven't flaunted my financial success because, in my experience, it changes how people treat you. I wanted authentic relationships based on who I am, not what I own. My father, recovering his composure, leaned forward with sudden interest. Madison, this is remarkable news. You should have told us directly. With your business acumen and our family connections, we could exponentially grow your company's potential. Our latest product helps small businesses compete against exactly the kind of corporate consolidation your investment firm specializes in, I replied. I'm not sure our business philosophies align. That can be discussed, he said dismissively. The important thing is that you've proven yourself a Nelson after all. We should talk about integrating your company into the family portfolio. I shook my head. That's not going to happen. Nexus remains independent. We've always believed in you, my mother interjected, her social smile back in place. I've told all my friends how proud we are of your entrepreneurial spirit. The transparent attempt to rewrite history might have hurt once. Now it's simply confirmed the wisdom of my choices. I built this company without family connections or support, I said. Our success comes from creating technology that empowers rather than exploits. We've helped thousands of small businesses compete in markets previously dominated by corporations. Our foundation provides tech education in communities that have been systematically excluded from the digital economy. Brian leaned forward eagerly. You know, I've been working on a business plan myself. Revolutionary concept. I'd love to pitch it to you sometime, get your expert opinion. Aunt Denise nodded enthusiastically. What a clever strategy, Madison, keeping your success quiet. Very shrewd. One by one, family members who had dismissed me minutes earlier now attempted to align themselves with my success. The sudden shift would have been comical if it weren't so predictable. I took a sip of water before addressing the table again. I'm not sharing this information to impress you or to change our relationships overnight, but going forward, I would appreciate honesty. If my choices don't make sense to you, ask me about them rather than making assumptions. If you're interested in my work, engage with what I actually do rather than what you think I should be doing. Of course, darling, my mother said quickly. We're family, after all. Being family should mean support and acceptance, I replied. It should mean celebrating each other's authentic paths, not just the ones that match preconceived notions of success. I turned toward Grandma Ruth, whose eyes twinkled with quiet pride. Some of you have consistently shown me kindness and genuine interest, regardless of what you thought about my career or financial status. That means everything to me. Grandma Ruth reached over to pat my hand. I always knew you were special, dear. Though I admit I didn't realize quite how special. Young Lily beamed from her seat. This is the coolest thing ever. Can I intern at your company next summer? We'll definitely talk about it, I promised with a genuine smile. Looking back at the adults, I continued, I'm open to building more authentic relationships with all of you, but it has to be based on mutual respect. I won't pretend to be someone I'm not to make others comfortable, and I won't measure my worth or anyone else's by their possessions or status symbols. I deliberately didn't issue ultimatums or dramatic declarations about cutting people off. Instead, I simply established clear expectations for how I wished to be treated going forward, leaving each person to decide whether they could meet those expectations. As the dessert plates were cleared in uncomfortable silence, I decided against prolonging an already eventful evening. I should head out, I said, rising from my chair. I really do have an early call tomorrow. The protests were immediate and predictable. But you just got here, my mother insisted, though we'd been at the table for over 2 hours. You can't leave now, my father added. We have so much to discuss about your business ventures. Another time, I promised, though we both knew the likelihood of that conversation happening on equal terms was slim. I made my way around the table, saying polite goodbyes to each family member. The interactions had transformed from dismissive to deferential in the space of 15 minutes, with several relatives pressing business cards into my hand. When I reached Grandma Ruth, I leaned down to give her a proper hug. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, I whispered. Nonsense, she replied. You had your reasons. But I expect a proper visit soon where you'll tell me everything. Promise, I agreed. Lily approached shyly. Did you really mean what you said about maybe interning? Absolutely, I assured her. Send me an email and we'll set something up. We have a great high school program. My departure created a flurry of activity as family members suddenly found reasons to walk me out. My father attempted to discuss potential investments, while my mother suggested lunch dates with some fascinating friends who would love to meet you. Brian hovered nearby, clutching a napkin on which he'd scrawled his business concept. When Thomas brought my Corolla around, pulling it between the Porsche and the Mercedes, there was a collective intake of breath from my assembled relatives. The contrast between their knowledge of my wealth and the modest vehicle seemed to physically pain them. You really drive this. By choice? Brian couldn't help asking. It's reliable, I replied simply, handing Thomas a generous tip. Thanks for your help tonight, Thomas. And don't forget to have your daughter send me that resume. Yes, Miss Madison. She'll be thrilled. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror to see my family still standing in the driveway, a tableau of confusion and recalculation. The pressure that had been building in my chest all evening finally released, and I found myself laughing out loud in the quiet car. The moment I was out of sight of the house, I pulled over and called Jennifer. So, she answered immediately. Did it work? Perfectly, I confirmed. Your timing was impeccable. I've been waiting by the phone all night. Tell me everything. What did they say? What did they do? Was Brian's face as priceless as we imagined? I described the scene in detail, both of us laughing at the family's transparent attempts to pivot from condescension to networking in the span of seconds. The private jet was a nice touch, I admitted. Though now I suppose I'll need to actually go to Tokyo to maintain credibility. Well, we have been talking about expanding into the Asian market, Jennifer pointed out. 2 birds, 1 stone. True. Which parts were real again? I lost track during your performance. The $50 million acquisition is inflated, but based on the Stream Tech negotiations. The education center funding is accurate, though it's $12 million, not 15. And you don't have a Tesla on order, but maybe you should. That Corolla really is ancient. Don't you start, I warned, though there was no heat in it. We chatted for a few more minutes before ending the call, with Jennifer promising to start putting together the Tokyo itinerary in the morning. As I drove the familiar route home, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. For 8 years, I'd maintained a careful separation between my professional success and my personal life, particularly with my family. That boundary had dissolved in an instant. There would be consequences, both positive and negative. Family dynamics established over decades had been upended. Expectations would shift. Relationships would realign. When I arrived home, I kicked off my shoes and made a cup of tea, carrying it to my favorite window seat that overlooked the quiet neighborhood. My house was modest by the standards of my net worth, but it was comfortable and, more importantly, mine. I'd chosen every element of it based on what I liked, not what would impress others. Looking around at the bookshelves filled with well-read volumes, the photographs of friends on hiking trips and kayaking adventures, the artwork purchased from local artists whose work spoke to me, I felt a profound appreciation for the life I'd built. It wasn't perfect, but it was authentic. As a child, I desperately sought my parents' approval, trying to contort myself into whatever shape might finally earn their validation. The liberation of walking away from that need had been gradual but profound. Success had been part of it, proving to myself that I could thrive on my own terms. But the deeper freedom had come from recognizing that their approval was never the prize I'd imagined it to be. Still, I couldn't deny the lingering sadness for the relationship I wished we had. Every child deserves parents who see and celebrate them for who they truly are. Acknowledging that grief while still moving forward had been one of my hardest personal lessons. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. "How was the family dinner from hell?" I smiled, typing back, "Eventful. They found out about the company." His response came quickly, "Whoa. Intentional." "Sort of. Long story. Call tomorrow." "Definitely. Hope you're okay." For what it's worth, I think you're amazing, successful tech CEO or not. His message warmed me in a way the entire evening with my family hadn't. Here was someone who knew me, the real me beyond titles and bank accounts, and valued what he saw. Before heading to bed, I opened my laptop and began a task I'd been contemplating for months. I created trust funds for Grandma Ruth, Lily, and Uncle Henry, the family members who had shown me genuine kindness regardless of perceived status. They would never want for anything, though I would need to find the right way to present this gift without creating dependence or obligation. I also drafted an email to my executive team about shifting more company resources toward our social impact initiatives. If tonight had reinforced anything, it was the emptiness of wealth without purpose and connection. Finally, I opened the browser to a car dealership website. Maybe it was time to retire the faithful Corolla after all. Not for a status symbol, but simply as an acknowledgement that sometimes change can be healthy. I found myself drawn to a modest hybrid, practical yet comfortable. It felt like the right balance. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I realized I felt lighter than I had in years. The carefully constructed walls between my worlds had been exhausting to maintain. Moving forward with more integration between my personal and professional lives would bring challenges, but also relief. I would navigate this new terrain with the same values that had guided me so far: authenticity, purpose, and the courage to define success on my own terms. 6 months passed in a blur of change and adjustment. The Tokyo trip had been productive professionally and liberating personally, allowing me time to process the dramatic shift in my family dynamics while finalizing our Asian market expansion. Upon returning, I had faced the challenge of recalibrating nearly every relationship in my life. Today, my modest home buzzed with activity as I prepared for an informal dinner gathering. I'd recently purchased a slightly larger house in the same neighborhood, still well below what I could afford, but with more space for entertaining. The move had been less about upgrading and more about creating a space that better reflected my whole self. "Are you sure I can't help with anything?" Jennifer asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. After years of maintaining professional boundaries, we'd gradually developed a friendship beyond our work relationship. "Everything's under control," I assured her, checking the oven. "Sam's handling the grill." Through the patio doors, I could see Sam chatting with Uncle Henry as they tended to the steaks and vegetable skewers. Their conversation appeared animated, likely another debate about science education funding. In the 6 months since the revelatory Thanksgiving dinner, Sam had adjusted to my financial status with remarkable grace, his only request being that I let him pay for dates occasionally to maintain his teacher dignity. Grandma Ruth sat in the most comfortable chair in the living room, deep in conversation with Lily. At 17, Lily was flourishing in our company's high school internship program, showing a natural aptitude for user experience design. The trust fund I'd established for her would ensure she could attend any college she chose, though she didn't know about it yet. That conversation would wait until she'd been accepted on her own merits. Notably absent were the family members who couldn't adjust to our new dynamic. My parents had made several awkward attempts to insinuate themselves into my business affairs, arranging accidental meetings with potential investors who just happen to be old family friends. When those efforts failed, they'd retreated into a chilly politeness, our interactions now limited to occasional stilted phone calls. Brian had pitched his revolutionary business idea, which turned out to be a derivative app concept with questionable market potential. When I offered honest feedback instead of investment, his initial enthusiasm had quickly cooled. Anthony still sent the occasional text with articles about me, usually accompanied by reminders of how she'd always supported my endeavors. The doorbell rang, and Jennifer moved to answer it. "That's probably the Wongs," I said. David and May Wong were neighbors who had become good friends, appreciating me for my gardening tips rather than my company valuation. As the house filled with guests, I was struck by the authenticity of the gathering. Everyone present knew my financial status, but related to me as a person first. The conversations revolved around ideas, experiences, and genuine interests rather than acquisitions or status markers. During dinner, Grandma Ruth tapped her glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her voice still strong at 86. To Madison, who reminded this old woman that true wealth isn't what you have, but who you are. To Madison, the table echoed, raising their glasses. Feeling a blush rise to my cheeks, I deflected the attention. "And to new beginnings and authentic connections." Later, as dessert was being served, Lily approached me with her laptop. "Can I show you something?" "It's the project I've been working on at the internship." "Of course," I said, making room beside me. She opened a prototype for an app designed to connect lower-income students with professional mentors in various fields. "I was thinking about what you said about technology creating access and opportunity. What do you think?" "I think it's brilliant," I said honestly, immensely proud of her growth. "Let's talk to the development team about allocating resources to build this out properly." Her face lit up. "Really? You think it could actually launch? With you leading the project?" "Absolutely." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Sam found me in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. "Successful night," he observed, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Definitely better than my last family dinner," I agreed, leaning into him. "Speaking of family," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice, "my parents are visiting next month." "They'd love to meet you." "I'd like that," I said, turning to face him. "Fair warning. They're simple people." Dad worked 40 years at the same factory. Mom was a nurse. Their retirement condo in Florida is the fanciest thing they've ever owned. "They sound wonderful," I said sincerely. "Will they be uncomfortable knowing about?" I gestured vaguely at my life circumstances. Sam laughed. "Mom will probably ask if you need help with your tax returns. Dad will want to make sure your car is properly maintained and your investments are diversified. But mostly, they'll just want to know if you make their son happy." "And do I?" I asked, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "More than I ever thought possible," he replied, kissing me softly. After the last guest had departed and Sam had gone home, we were taking things slowly. I sat on my back porch with a final glass of wine, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. The healing process hadn't been linear. I'd worked with a therapist to unpack decades of family conditioning, learning to recognize and release the deeply ingrained belief that I needed to earn love through achievement. I'd built new friendships based on shared values and interests rather than childhood proximity or family connections. I'd established clearer boundaries with family members who continued to see me primarily as a resource or a reflection of themselves. Most importantly, I'd learned to integrate the different aspects of my identity: the successful CEO, the loyal friend, the woman still working through childhood wounds, the partner discovering the vulnerability of genuine intimacy. For years, I'd compartmentalized these parts of myself, showing different faces in different contexts. The exhaustion of that performance had been more costly than I'd realized until I let it go. My company had evolved alongside me. As leader, I'd become more transparent about our mission and values, attracting team members and clients who shared our vision for technology as an equalizing force. Our foundation had expanded its work, funding tech education in underserved communities across the country. We'd launched a mentorship program connecting young people from disadvantaged backgrounds with opportunities in the tech sector. The Toyota Corolla had finally been retired, donated to a community college automotive program where students would learn maintenance skills by restoring it. Its replacement, a practical hybrid, sat in the driveway alongside Sam's well-loved Subaru. Neither vehicle was designed to impress, but both reliably transported us to places and experiences that mattered. As I watched the stars emerge in the night sky, I reflected on the true nature of wealth and success. Financial resources provided freedom and opportunity, certainly. But the real treasure was having the courage to live authentically, to be known and accepted for who you truly are rather than what you possess or achieve. The journey wasn't complete. I still occasionally found myself slipping into old patterns of seeking validation through accomplishment. Family gatherings still triggered moments of that familiar tension. But with each authentic connection, each decision aligned with my values rather than external expectations, the path forward became clearer. True freedom, I discovered, wasn't found in proving others wrong or right. It wasn't in accumulating resources or accolades. It was in the liberation from needing others to validate your worth. It was in the quiet confidence of knowing yourself and living in alignment with that knowledge, regardless of who understands. As I considered the evening just past, filled with genuine laughter and conversation, I felt profound gratitude. The painful Thanksgiving revelation had been necessary catalysis for this more integrated life. Sometimes walls need to come down before something better can be built. How do you measure your success? Is it in the possessions you accumulate, the impression you make on others, or something deeper? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to be reminded that their worth isn't determined by others' opinions. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember, the most valuable thing you own is your authentic self.